Hello students, welcome to EPG Pathshala. Today in this module, we are going to discuss about application of remote sensing and GIS in the study of wetland dynamics. As we all know, wetlands are the transitional zone between aquatic and terrestrial region. They represent an unique feature that has important in maintaining biotic environment. There are different types of wetland depending upon the sources and the location of where they are found. But one of the main concern that needs to be addressed in this module is the shrinkage or the degradation of wetland in many areas due to population growth over the period of time. Many of the wetland has already been extinct or many of are under threat due to this reason. Therefore, proper understanding of the ecological importance of wetland and the characteristic of wetland is very much important, and in the study of wetland dynamics, the role of remote sensing and GIS has become very important because we need to monitor, and this GIS tools is going to help in monitoring the wetland dynamics. So today in this regard, in this module we are going to study about the characteristic and types of wetland, the ecological importance of wetland, and how the role of remote sensing and GIS plays in the study of wetland dynamics. Okay student, let us talk about the introduction of what is wetland. Wetland are the transitional zone between aquatic and terrestrial region. Water covers the soil or present near the surface of the soil all year or for varying period of time during the year. A wetland is a land area that is saturated with water either permanently or seasonally, displaying characteristic of a distinct ecosystem. The primary factor that distinguishes wetland from other forms, land forms or water bodies is the characteristic vegetation of aquatic plant adapted to the unique hydric soil. A patch of land that develops pools of water after a rainstorm would not be considered a wetland, even though the land is wet. Wetlands have unique characteristic. They are generally distinguished from other water bodies or landform based on their water level and on the types of plant that live within them. Specifically, wetlands are characterized as having a water table that stands at or near the land surface for a long enough period each year to support aquatic plant. Wetlands have also been described as ecotone, providing a transitional between dry land and water bodies. Water saturation largely determine how the soil develops and the types of plants and animal communities living in and on the soil. Wetlands may support both aquatic and terrestrial species. The prolonged presence of water creates condition that favors the growth of specially adapted plants, hydrophytes, and promotes the development of characteristic wetland, that is the hydric soil. A note can be generated here that hydric soil is the soil that permanently or seasonally saturated by water. It is found near under condition of saturation, flooding and ponding long enough, developing anaerobic condition in the upper part. Ramsar Convention. Under the Ramsar International Wetland Conservation Treaty, wetlands are defined as wetlands are area of marsh, fan, peatland or water, whether natural or artificial, permanent or temporary, with water that is static or flowing, fresh, brackish or salt, including areas of marine water, the depth of which at low tide does not exceed 6 meters, and wetlands may incorporate riparian and coastal zones adjacent to the wetlands, and islands or bodies of marine water deeper than 6 meter at low tide lying within the wetlands. Ramsar Convention signed in Ramsar, Iran in the year 1971. It is an intergovernmental treaty which provide the framework for national action and international cooperation for conservation and wise use of wetland and its resources. There are presently 162 contracting parties to the convention with 2040 wetland sites. Now students, let us look into the characteristic of wetland. Wetland hydrology is associated with the spatial and temporal dispersion, flow and physiochemical attributes of surface and groundwater in its reservoir. Based on hydrology, wetlands can be categorized as riverine associated with streams, lacustrine associated with lake and reservoir, and palustrine, that is isolated. Sources of hydrological flows into wetland are predominantly precipitation, surface water and groundwater. Water flows out of wetland by evapotranspiration, surface runoff and subsurface water outflow. Hydrodynamic, the movement of water through and from a wetland, affects hydro period, that is temporal fluctuation in water level by controlling the water balance and water storage within a wetland. In the soil of wetland, carbon is the major nutrient cycled within wetland. Most nutrients such as sulfur, phosphorus, carbon and nitrogen are found within the soil of wetlands. Anaerobic and aerobic respiration in the soil influence the nutrient cycling of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen and nitrogen and the solubility of phosphorus, thus contributing to the chemical variation in water. Wetlands with low pH and saline conductivity may reflect the presence of acid sulfates, and wetland with average salinity level can be heavily influenced by calcium and magnesium. The biota of wetland system includes its vegetation zones and structure as well as animal population. The most important factor affecting the biota is the duration of flooding. Other important factors include fertility and salinity. In fans, species are highly dependent on water chemistry. The chemistry of water flowing into wetlands depends on the source of water and the geological material in which it flows through, as well as the nutrients discharged from organic matter in the soil and plants at higher elevation in slope wetland. Biota may vary within a wetland due to seasons or recent flood regimes. Wetland may have different functions as a result of their position in the landscape and their dominant water source. Although all wetlands receive precipitation, the precipitation events serve as the sole source of water for some wetlands. Precipitation dominated wetlands may supply water to headwater stream and groundwater by infiltration. Now students, let us look into the types of wetland. There are 42 different categories of wetland. It broadly classified as marine and coastal wetland, inland wetland and man-made wetland. Another classification can be done depending upon types of dominant water supply or water types are as precipitation domain wetland, groundwater domain wetland and surface water domain wetland. Let us first look into the precipitation domain wetland. This kind of wetlands are mostly dominated by rainfall or precipitation. Bogs is one of the common in this type. Bogs are waterlogged peatland in all lake basin or depression in the landscape, forming where peat accumulation exceeds decomposition as a result of climatic condition. Bogs are precipitation dominated because the accumulated peat formation elevate the system suffers sufficiently relative to the surrounding landscape that there are few or no surface inflow. Since bogs do not receive nutrient or organic matter transported by surface water, they have low rate of primary productivity and decomposition. Bogs are typically acidic because the dominant living plant matters, sphagnum mosses, release H plus ions, that is acidity, and the peat release organic acid. The pH in bogs can be as low as 3.0 to 4.0. Moreover, vernal pools, plies, perry patchholes, wet meadows and wet prairies are 5 different types, often categorized as marshes, but their dependence on precipitation rather than surface water. Dissolved oxygen level typically vary from ND, that is non-detectable, to 6 ppm. Hardness levels vary from 10 ppm to 65 ppm based on soil, rock types in area. Temperature is also variable based on location. Next is the groundwater domain wetland. This type of wetland is dominated by groundwater. Fans are the most common in this type. Fans are peat accumulating wetland that forms at low points in the landscape or near slope, where groundwater intercept the soil surface. Water levels are fairly constant all year because the water supply is provided by groundwater inputs. Fans like bogs tends to be glacial in origin and are found in northern United States and on mountain and mountainous side. Fens are dominated by herbaceous plant such as grass and seeds, typically like the sphagnum moss that predominate in bogs and look like meadow. Fens may represent an earlier successional stage of peat accumulation than bogs, and offer geologic time. Fens may become bogs. Unlike bogs, fens receive minerals and nutrients from groundwater because they have built up less peat and groundwater is still sufficiently close to the surface. Fens are less acidic than bogs because they have little or no sphagnum, and because groundwater inputs tends to be neutral or alkaline. The pH of fens range from 4.0 to 8.0. Dissolved oxygen level typically varies from 2 ppm to 8 ppm. Hardness range from 40 ppm to 95 ppm based on soil, rock type in area. The temperature range from 50 degree Fahrenheit to 57 degree Fahrenheit because of the groundwater content. Another type is the perry pothole. It is a shallow marsh-like ponds formed in a glacial depression such as Kettle and depression near moraines. It has high groundwater level. Dissolved oxygen level typically vary from 3 ppm to 7 ppm. Hardness range from 30 ppm to 80 ppm based on soil, rock type in area. Temperature range from 50 degree Fahrenheit to 57 degree Fahrenheit if wet by groundwater. Now, let us look into the surface water domains wetland. This type of wetlands are primarily saturated by surface water. Marshes are most common type of wetland in this category. Marshes are one of the broadest categories of wetland and in general harbor the greatest biological diversity. They are characterized by shallow water, little or no peat deposition and mineral soil. Marshes are dominated by flood-leafed plants such as water lilies and duckweeds, or emergent soft stem aquatic plants such as cattails, arrowheads, reeds and sedges. Marshes formed in depression in the landscape as fringes around lakes and along slow flowing stream and river. They are the transition between land and water. pH level are 5 to 8. High groundwater level. Dissolved oxygen level typically varies from 3 ppm to 10 ppm. Hardness based on soil, rock type in an area. Temperature also is variable based on the location. Tidal marshes is a continually or frequently inundated salt water wetland that is dominated by emergent herbaceous Vegetation. Tidal marshes typically are shallow and formed in transition area between land and water surrounding salt water bays, mouth of river, tidal pool areas. pH level are 6 to 8. It has groundwater level. Dissolved oxygen level typically varies from 3 ppm to 10 ppm. Hardness based on rock, soil type in area. Temperature also is variable based on the location. Next is the tidal freshwater marshes. They are found in the upstream of estuaries where the tide still influence water level, but where the water is predominantly fresh. Tidal freshwater marshes receive substantial water and nutrients from upstream water resources as well as input from runoff and precipitation. High nutrient inputs contribute to the extremely high primary productivity and biodiversity of this system. Now, let us look into the ecological importance of wetlands. Wetlands plays a number of roles in the environment, primarily water purification, flood control, carbon sink and shoreline stability. Wetlands are also considered the most biologically diverse of all ecosystems, serving as home to the wide range of plant and animal life. Constructed wetland can be used to treat municipal and industrial wastewater as well as storm water runoff. They may also play a role in water sensitive urban design. Wetlands occur naturally on every continent except Antarctica, the largest including the Amazon River Basin, the West Siberian Plain and the Pantanal in South America. Wetlands are very much productive area that forms essential ecological function. Wetland benefits include providing wildlife habitat, controlling erosion and conserving and purifying waters. Wetland provide habitat for a diverse assortment of wildlife species. These include bird, mammals, amphibian, fish, invertebrate and plants. Healthy wetlands are essential to the survival of many of these species. Wetlands are the area of where land and water meets. For wildlife, these translate into rich habitat with an abundance of food and protective cover. The wetland edge or riparian zone is a transition zone between wetland and upland. Healthy riparian zones are diverse habitat that attract non-aquatic wildlife, including many species of songbirds and upland mammals like the red fox. Wetlands are natural water purifier. Wetland vegetation help maintain water quality by breaking down and assimilating contaminated carried by surface runoff. Wetland purifies water through the number of biological, chemical and physical processes. Wetland stores surface water. Wetland functions like sponge by soaking up excess water during spring freshet. These reduce the impact of the flooding on upland areas. It slows and stabilizes heavy surface runoff. These reduce erosion of stream banks and floodplain areas and allow a portion of the sediment carried by runoff to settle. Areas downstream benefit from a reduced rate of sediment deposition. Wetlands provide fundamental ecological service and are regulation of water regimes and source of biodiversity at all level, species, genetic and ecosystem. Wetlands constitute a resource of great economic, scientific, cultural and recreational value for the community. Wetland plays a vital role in climate change adaptation and mitigation. Progressive encroachment and loss of wetland cause serious and sometimes irreparable environmental damage to the provision of ecosystem. Considering the importance of wetland as mentioned and its dynamic nature, the use of remote sensing and GIS are very much useful tools to monitor the wetland site. Regarding wetland, the user of geospatial techniques, remote sensing and GIS User primary concern is to monitor the wetland and assess the change within the wetland and its surrounding areas to take possible mitigation plan to conserve the wetlands in all manners. Okay students, now let us look into the role of remote sensing and GIS in wetland dynamics. Wetland comprises only 3 to 6% of Earth's land surface, but they provide human population with a host of goods and services, including water quality, agricultural production, fisheries and recreation. A wetland system need to be monitored over time in order to assess whether it is functioning at a ecologically sustainable level or whether it is becoming degraded. Degraded wetland will suffer a loss in water quality, a high number of threatened and endangered species and poor soil condition. Geoinformatics, mainly remote sensing and GIS, is playing a significant role in monitoring and restoring of wetland. As for the dynamics of lake in Egypt were studied using multi-temporal satellite remote sensing data, analyzing with the help of digital image processing technique and GIS overlay analysis. The hydrological parameters also accessed with the help of GIS technique for suggest suitable mitigation plan as waste water treatment, improvement of groundwater quality and long-term monitoring of water storage capacity for restoration. Similarly, the impact of land use, land cover dynamics and hydrological variability was analyzed and action plan was developed for its conservation in India using geospatial techniques. As you can see here, the boundary of this lake was taken from 1956 and how do these shrinkage of a wetland has been taking place over the period of time. Traditionally, Landsat MSS and Landsat TM, Landsat ETM Plus and SPOT satellite system has been used to study wetland. Other like AVHRR, IRS, JERS1, ERS1, SIRC and RadarSat are also used. There are limitations in use of optical data regarding wetland mapping. More recently, however, multispectral Iconos and QuickBird data with spatial resolution of 4 by 4 meters or which is 13 by 13 feet and 2.4 by 2.444 meter, 8.0 by 8.0 feet respectively, have been shown to be excellent source of data when mapping and monitoring smaller wetland habitat and vegetation communities are to be shown. And a small note is being written here for the Landsat MSS, which is Landsat multispectral scanner system. Landsat TM is Landsat thematic mapper. Landsat ETM Plus is Landsat enhanced thematic mapper plus. AVHRR is advanced very high resolution radiometer. IRS Indian remote sensing. JERS1 is Japanese Earth resource satellite 1. ERS is European remote sensing satellite 1. SIRC is subtle imaging radar with payload C. As far the classification of this image is concerned, most of the earliest work include visual interpretation with the help of aerial photography. Unsupervised classification or clustering is the most commonly used digital classification to map of wetland. Another commonly used method is maximum likelihood algorithm with a supervised classification. But most of the time these classification represent low to average accuracy in relation to ground. To increase the accuracy, researcher developed and apply some methods such as using multi-temporal data with various GIS analyze tool, non-parametric classification such as rule based classification using multispectral imagery. One of the most important fact is that wetland could be better defined on imagery acquired in spring when the water level is high but not flooded. Seasonal variation, one of the important consideration concerning the water body as well as surrounding land use, land cover. Here what you can see is the images which has been taken in different season, and the water level could be clearly depicted in the images. Some of the other method can be used are using multi-sensor assessment, neural network, hyperspectral data, ancillary data. Ancillary data provides the solution of the problem, that is differentiate between spectral similarities in wetland and agricultural land with water and forest waterlogged areas. However, there are a number of limitations associated with this type of image acquisition. Analysis of wetlands has proved difficult because to obtain the data, it is often linked to other purposes such as the analysis of land cover or land use. Practically, many natural wetlands are difficult to monitor, as these areas are quite often difficult to access and required exposure to native wildlife and potential endemic diseases. And note can be generated here that supervised classification and unsupervised classification are two commonly used image processing techniques that apply for digital interpretation of satellite images. It is primarily used for land use, land cover classification as well as wetland study. In supervised classification, user has the command on the classification type. Simply user can supervise the classification, and where an unsupervised classification in software itself classified the image. For accuracy assessment, user primarily calculates user accuracy and producer or consumer accuracy. Further, it also needs proper ground truth survey with the help of GPS, global positioning system, and digital photography to access the accuracy. Once it is accurately classified, one can calculate the change detection metrics. Okay student, today in this module we have learned about what is wetland, what are the characteristics of wetland, and what are the basic categories of wetland, and looking at the source and the location. And also we have learned about the ecological importance of wetland, and also why do we need to study the wetland. And also we have learned about the application of remote sensing and GIS in wetland study. What are the data sources, what are types of data we are going to take in the study of wetland study. And also we have learned about what are the types of classification techniques and the procedure in the study of wetland are all being discussed. I hope this module will be benefited for all of you. Thank you.